So all history is present to some degree around us. But the buildings, the fashions, the politics, the wars, the technologies of the past, while they affect us and have led us to this point, they're not really visible to us. If someone from the Middle Ages, say, from around 1,000 years ago, was suddenly transported here from the past, there's little in our culture that he or she would recognize. But one cultural aspect that would be immediately recognizable are the letters that make up the signage that characterize a modern commercial street. Not all the letters, but most of them. The history of letter forms, unlike most histories, is explicitly present in our everyday surroundings. Every day we look at typography, and the forms are completely relevant to us, as long as they make up words that interest us. But those forms, most of them, do have a history of thousands of years. And here, in downtown Toronto, we can see the evidence of histories from their origin in the Middle East thousands of years ago. To take just one example, if we look at a capital A, we can still see the image of an ox's head that was the basis of the first letter of the Phoenician alphabet. It is rotated from its original orientation, but is still recognizable as that essential ox's head. New letters have been added since that time in our and in other traditions. Some letters have been dropped. That early Phoenician alphabet that was spread around the Mediterranean slowly diverged into different scripts, most notably Greek and its Roman derivative. And the human habit of writing quickly evolved into the minuscule or lowercase letters that we use today. Of course, all the signage we see here now is created by computer using forms described by the computer PostScript language using Bezier curves, and this technology is only around 30 years old. But letters and typography are very conservative and largely resist being affected by technology. When Gutenberg started to use metal type, he imitated as well as he could the pen forms that had come before. And this continued as letters evolved almost not at all in basic form and very slowly in their construction. Many of the faces we see around us were developed or revived in the early 20th century, when typography became automated and industrialized with the monotype and linotype machines. Because of the proliferation of typefaces, much of what we see today was either revived or created in the early 20th century. Though their basic forms are necessarily ancient, if we're going to be able to recognize them. So, type embodies history, and that history makes studying the history of typography more relevant than many other kinds of history. It's not always easy to find typefaces from pre-1800 on the street, at least ones where we have the caps and the lowercase letters. But here's an example. This is a Baskerville, but it's not the Baskerville that was designed by Baskerville in 1757. This is a later version, designed at the Fry foundry by Isaac Moore in the 1760s. You can see, well, perhaps you can see that compared to a regular Baskerville, it has higher contrast, more modeled letters, and a more vertical, even more vertical contrast between thicks and thins. Baskerville is an interesting typeface. John Baskerville was trying to perfect William Caslon's quintessentially English face, which is really considered, Caslon's face being considered the first truly English typeface. Enormously popular. Baskerville, who made a lot of money in the lacquering trade, basically producing lacquered goods, wanted to perfect the English typeface and also perfect printing. And so not only did he design and have cut a typeface to his own specifications, largely influenced by his stone cutting, but also he made new kinds of paper and new kinds of ink. And it was really a giant leap for typography. Baskerville's faces were not popular in England, but they were very influential and influenced the later typefaces of Bodoni and Didot. And so therefore it was the first step. His typeface is considered transitional, and the next step is the modern typeface. So Morris Fuller Benton of American Type Founders, the ATF, is responsible for more typefaces than any other type designer. though some of his work is essentially copies of existing fonts, as we'll see with French script, for example. This typeface above me here is Hobo from 1910. It's a completely original design that is still, surprisingly, to me at least, popular. It has sort of an Art Nouveau flavor, and it's a distantly related ancestor of the 1970s typeface Benguet, maybe. It is notable the lower character descenders, of course we don't see here in this all cap setting, all the descenders fall in the baseline. The explosion of the typefaces in the early 20th century we look at in week 9 of the course. Hobo also plays a character in the movie, the little video, Cooper Black Behind the Typeface. You could check it out on the Veer, VEER.com website. Cooper Black Behind the Typeface. It's really quite funny. Okay, it's just about lunchtime here, so here are Burrito Banditos. This shows use of, at least the white type there, is Adobe's Mesquite, which is one of the wood type fonts that they developed in the early 1990s, based on the wood typefaces that were invented in 1837 by Darius Wells in New York. And wood type, it was easy to make big, it was easy to make complex, and it was relatively cheap to produce. So it really worked with that Victorian aspect of, you know, coming up with new typefaces, new, fantastic, unusual, original-looking typefaces. It was used for large display. Because it was so light, it was much cheaper to ship. It was cheaper than making letters out of metal, which is the way that type had been done up till then. And you know, most of type metal is lead, so fairly expensive and very heavy. So this and the other typefaces are based on ones produced by William Page and Company, who is one of the biggest producers of wood type in the US in the 1800s. These types are often associated with the West, you know, wanted posters and things like that. So it makes a lot of sense for the bandito motif that this place uses. We do look at the Industrial Revolution and the kind of type, the kind of wood type that we see here in week 7 of the course. Okay, up here we have Drama Queen. French script is the large type that you see, large chalk type, with a drop shadow added. Originally released as a type for metal type for hand setting in 1878 in Paris by the Chapelle Foundry. We don't know who the author is. It's essentially a formalization of a current handwriting style that also turned up quite often in engraving, in hand engraving. It was then adapted and released by many other foundries, including Stevenson Blake, which is a major type foundry in Sheffield in the north of England in 1905. It was also released by ATF under the name Typo Upright, and the design was credited to Morris Fuller Benton, who designed many typefaces, and by Linotype for the Linotype system under the name Linoscript. You can see that it reflects the split nib pen in that it has the hairline strokes and particularly the joins. So it's a font that has its formal origins in cursive writing, and which we first see in Roman times, and its particular aesthetic origin in the late 1800s. Today, what connotations does it have? Well, decorative, not too serious. Makes sense, I guess, for this kind of business. And the smaller type you see is Roger Estophan's Mistral, which, as I say in other times, is very, very popular and I would say overused among travel agencies. Here we are in Queen Street again. What we see up here is Old English, a digital form of black letter type. And black letter originated after the fall of the Roman Empire over, well, actually after the Carolingian Renaissance, as letters got tighter. This is, of course, handwriting. It's before type. As letters got tighter, more contrast, 45-degree angles. This is the kind of writing, essentially, that was done in the monasteries. When the Renaissance came along, we switched to, in most cases, to a more Carolingian style, the Roman type that we're used to today. It still remains today. In pubs, you'll see it in things like on the Bibles, you'll see it in newspapers, because it still has that connotation of authority. Connotation of authority and of, the past. And, yeah, Old English. So as you can see, the typefaces we see on the street have histories behind them. There are many other typefaces that have interesting stories that you can see along Queen Street. For example, Futura, Paul Renner's typeface of 1927, is probably the most common along this strip of Queen Street. Times Roman, of a similar era, but with a very different design philosophy, is also pretty common. The historical faces, the old styles, the transitionals, the moderns are less evident in signage, but they can still be found. And there is no question that they still thrive in text applications such as newspapers, magazines, and books. So as you walk around, as you read, take a look, take note of the typefaces that you see, the media by which all this information that you see comes to you. It can make the world a more interesting place, and you may get a better understanding of why the designers chose the typefaces, or maybe why you could have made a better choice.